It's now time to take a look, an in-depth look at the markets, the major issues this week and more. And for that, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Dr. Kim Seiwan, economics professor at Ewha Womans University. Thank you for coming in today, Dr. Kim.
You're welcome.
Let me start off with the U.S. China trade war. It's intensifying. There seems to be no resolution to it yet. The leaders of both nations will meet at the G20 summit next week in Japan. Xi Jinping, Chinese President Xi Jinping has just wrapped up his trip to North Korea.
Right.
And eyes will definitely have been on whether that will play a part or have an effect on the trade negotiations between Beijing and Washington. Do you think President Xi could use his trip to North Korea as leverage for upcoming trade negotiations?
I think so. President Xi's visit to Pyongyang is very high-level diplomatic and economic gesture against United States and South Korea. As we have seen recent Hong Kong's massive street demonstration against Chinese government, U.S. government's comments on that demonstration gave a kind of pressure on Chinese government's negotiation strategy with the United States. So President Xi wants to show off his and China's power, geopolitical power in Far East area to have a better leverage with the trade negotiation with the United States.
Now, let's move on to the Federal Reserve. It has kept its interest rates steady for now, but it has hinted at possibly future rate cuts. They are citing possible risks stemming from the trade spat with China and other geopolitical risks as well. If they were to cut rates in the future, will this force the Bank of Korea here to follow suit and ease monetary policy? And if the Bank of Korea does, when do you think it will come and by how much?
That really depends on the result of two summits meeting in G20 Osaka. The Bank of Korea has a really worried about the risk increase due to the negotiations between China and the United States. And that gives a really huge negative impact in global economy, particularly on South Korean economy. But if the result of the two summits meeting is really no good as a worst scenario, there is very high possibility that U.S. Federal Reserve will cut interest rate in the middle of July next month. So Bank of Korea will try to cut the interest rate of South Korea after seeing that with some negative signs from South Korean economy. If they begin to cut the interest rate, they will further cut interest rate by another 0.25% by the end of the year.
Now let's look at things here in Korea. Household debt in the country continues to be a problem. Although the rate of the debt increase has slowed somewhat recently, the amount of debt is still quite high nonetheless. Also, more companies are also struggling to pay off their debt. So it's not just households, individuals, it's also with companies as well. Are we in danger of increased credit risks, and what else should we look out for?
Well, according to Bank of Korea's Financial Market Stability Report released yesterday, as you said, the risk of household debt is kind of weakened compared to that of the last year because South Korean government's very strict regulations on mortgage loans. However, on the other side, the risk of the loans from marginal firms that do not pay their interest debt from their business activities is increasing very quickly. In addition, the self-employees business risk is very much increasing with higher default risk. So these two risks are increasing very quickly. So that should be considered further from government's policies.
Now, the government says it will boost manufacturing. President Moon Jae-in announced his so-called manufacturing renaissance vision recently, and he's wanting to implement that plan to revitalize the Korean economy. And his administration is also aiming to make Korea the world's fourth largest manufacturing nation within the next 11 years, so by the year 2030. Why the manufacturing sector, and why now?
The strongest part of the Korean economy has been manufacturing, represented by like Samsung Electronics and Hyundai Motors. But manufacturing has been weakened internationally due to not market-friendly regulations from governments and international competition, particularly with China. So to maintain our economic growth momentum, it is extremely important to improve the manufacturing structure along with new introduction of high-tech manufacturings like 3D printers and IoTs and so on.
Now, in order to assess how practical President Moon's so-called manufacturing renaissance vision is, we will have to look at the details of the plan. As we always say, the devil's in the detail.
Right.
Are there any ideas or any areas where there should be improvements?
Well, rebuilding manufacturing sector requires introduction of the new industry, particularly high-tech industries like IoTs, 3D printers, and self-driving automobiles and so on. That means these new manufacturing industries competing with previous old-fashioned industry. So government has to have and build up their own power and ability to managing conflicts with different industries. Without that, it is very difficult to implement new manufacturing policies.
Right. All right, Dr. Kim, that's where we'll have to leave things for now. We appreciate your insights. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you very much.